Hi everyone, my name is Taylor Jones. I am currently in EDU 397 Methods for K-8 Language Arts and Social Studies. For my Connections and Concepts project, I chose to focus on how conducting public information campaigns can influence students' learning. For this project, I chose to focus on ILAS strategy number 10, which is incorporating service learning. How do we incorporate this though? Service learning provides students with opportunities to connect their historic geographic knowledge that they have taken from the classroom and use it in community problem solving. This also increases students' awareness of and the interest in their community and the world around them. And it also assists students in developing democratic attitudes they can use in the future. What is service learning? It's a teaching and learning strategy that connects academic curriculum to community problem solving. From the Community Service Act of 1990, I define service learning as under which students or participants learn and develop through active participation in thoughtfully organized service that is conducted in and meets the needs of a community. This can be coordinated into an elementary classroom, a secondary classroom, an institution of higher education, or community service program, and with the community, and it also helps foster civic responsibility. There are 4 types of service learning. There is direct service learning, indirect service learning, research-based service learning, and advocacy service learning. Direct service learning focuses on face-to-face service projects. Indirect service learning focuses on service that benefits the community or environment. Both research-based and service learning and advocacy service learning are what I focused on for this project. Research-based service learning focuses on service that relates to the gathering and presenting of information that is in the area of interest, and advocacy service learning focuses on service that relates to educating others about topics of public interest. There are 2 essential questions that I chose to focus on for my presentation. The first is, how can service learning be implemented into the classroom to better prepare students in becoming contributors to their communities while enhancing their social studies knowledge? My second question is, how much influence do students have in their community? So for this project, I chose to focus on 3 of the NCSS themes that we have discussed throughout our course. The first is civic ideals in practice. One example of this would be planning and putting on public forums on topics of interest in the community, which we will later discuss. I also chose power, authority, and governance, which is working with elected officials to draft legislation to improve communities. I will be telling you all a story about a couple of BELT students who have done this year. My last is individual development and identity, which is tutoring other students and adults. I chose 2 Montana content standards to focus on from the English, Language Arts, and Literacy. The first is analyzing how and why individuals, events, and ideas develop and interact over the course of a text. I also chose how to assess how point of view or purpose shapes the content and style of a text. Along with those 2 standards, I also chose 2 Montana content standards from the social studies point of view. The first one was demonstrating civic participation within the classroom or school, and the second is explaining how Montana has changed over time given its cultural diversity and how this history impacts the present. But before we begin, what is a public information campaign? It's a certain type of instrument that is used to educate the public about current events that are taking place, and also to bring awareness to an issue that may need to be confronted. This could be anything from recycling to mental health to suicide prevention to school policies. This awareness can be built through a variety of platforms such as social media, messaging, a rally, or community-held gathering. For my project, we'll be focusing on rallies and community-held gatherings. Oftentimes, when a public information campaign is being used, A common goal is set by the creators at the very beginning so that both creators and the people that they are speaking to know exactly what is coming out of it and what the intentions are by the campaign. But why should we implement these public information campaigns? Well, first off, students are able to use these campaigns in order to take an active role in their own learning, instead of just focusing on listening to a teacher talk in the front of the classroom or just solely learning from group discussion. This leadership role opens students' eyes to how important they can be in their communities, no matter their age, sex, race, etc. Depending on the campaign strategies that are chosen, students also have the opportunity to work with literacy devices, which was very important in our class considering we are talking about language arts. And then they're also able to dive deeper into social studies content that we have also discussed in class. Lastly, I want to discuss how these public information campaigns spark a type of interest. A lot of times we struggle with keeping our students' interest, and by using public information campaigns, these students are focusing on political and social issues that affect them directly, affect their community, the people they love, their family, their friends, and this leads to them being more engaged in their learning. So before moving on, I have chosen to just include a couple of examples of some public information campaigns that can be used at any grade level. The first one is recycling and going green. So at a young age for early elementary students, this could just be simply learning about what recycling is and then creating a flow chart showing how recycling betters their community. Up into high school students who can create their own campaigns and then go about it in their communities and, present it in a visual way. The second is suicide prevention and teen mental health. At a young age, this may be a touchy subject for young students, and so instead of focusing on suicide prevention, we can teach them about why it's important to take care of themselves and that their social and emotional health is just as important as their learning is. And then once they reach the high school ages, we can focus more on the suicide prevention and they can create presentations and campaigns that they can show their communities. The third is school policies and reforms. Again, at a young age, this may be a struggle, but it's important for young students to even understand what classroom rules are and how they can take a part in creating these rules. And then up into high school, this could include student council. This could include students just getting together and wanting to make a change through a campaign. And last is healthy living. So at a young age, this could go for creating campaigns about washing your hands and how to not spread germs. Up into high school, this could go about taking care of yourself and partaking in activities in a healthy and safe way. So how do we increase student interest? First, we begin by just simply providing our students with a voice, and that is exactly what these public campaigns do. Students are able to take a topic of interest and show it to the world and not just learn about it in books. This also creates opportunities for deeper engagement with members of their community. A lot of times we don't create opportunities for our students to use their learning outside of the classroom, and so by implementing these public information campaigns, students are in charge of talking to members of their community and figuring out exactly what changes need to be made. And the last is bringing in outside resources. So this could be people, this could be going on field trips, basically anything that is not solely used in the classroom. How do I include English language learners? This can be hard because in a lot of ways it can be difficult for ELLs to take part in the classroom. Therefore, by engaging with members of the community, these students are working towards a common goal while also picking up on unfamiliar language and gaining a sense of others' cultures. This can also create a feeling of a safe environment because students now feel like they are more a part of their community and they're not outcasts. So a big part of this class was incorporating the 6 language arts, and I feel that public information campaigns do just that, because not only are students reading about certain concepts and issues, but they have to write about them. They're viewing different videos of what's going on. They're able to talk with not only their classmates, but community members about changes that need to be made. Visual representations are included immensely in this, because campaigns are all about charts and providing that visual aspect so that it's not just people talking. And lastly, the biggest part of being able to make a change is first listening to the changes that need to be made. So background knowledge is essential in order to take part in this. In order to be successful at a public information campaign, students first have to be educated on that issue, and this is where those literary devices come into play. This takes on the use of a classroom library or a public library. Students can take advantage of local sources and online resources that they wouldn't otherwise use unless they were taking part in some type of activity such as this one. And most importantly, as educators, it's our job to support these students, and so that not only are we watching them do so, but we're also making changes as teachers and members of our community. So how do we implement history into our public information campaigns? Like I stated before, it's important for these students to have that background information on the issues that are present in order to make a change. They use the content not only that they've learned in class, but they're also diving into new literacy content and new historical content that focuses on the issue and that builds their understanding better instead of just reading a chapter out of a social studies textbook. One example that I gave is if students are focusing on the importance of recycling, they need to research how past events such as the beginning of landfills and major historical events that have happened, why exactly are we so worried about recycling? So for my project, I chose to interview a couple of local teachers that are around my community and how they've implemented this strategy. First off, in Fort Shaw, the second grade students chose to go visit a local rancher who plays a huge role in our community. So when he goes to sell his beef in the fall, not only is he selling it for the money, but all that beef goes straight back to the school for lunches. And so that's showing the students that everyone makes a change. Power students, their 8th graders, focused on how there's E. coli in the irrigation ditches and how by using an information campaign, they could let their community members know the steps of making sure they're drinking clean water. Lastly, the high school students at Belt decided to work with the chief of the police department in Great Falls in creating a safer environment for families and their children by implementing a community watch group. And along with that went also suicide prevention, because they had 2 students who had recently committed suicide, and so they wanted to make a change and make it well known. Also for this project, I chose to create my own service learning lesson that I would incorporate, and it included an Industrial Revolution social studies lesson that talked about how coal production has affected the environment. I chose to use the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act as a way for students to dig into their social studies content, and then I also chose to read Life During the Industrial Revolution, written by Julia Garstecki, because that also incorporates the language arts aspect of this course. So just a few questions to wrap up that I have for my attendees. First one is, in what ways can you support your future students through public campaigns? The second is, how do we connect our content knowledge with students' interests? And the last question I have for you all is, what is the next step? I want to thank you all for not only attending my presentation, but also taking this next step in our journey to becoming teachers. Good luck, everyone.